All right, this is our next module, Module 6 on geometry. Here is Lesson 1. This is for 7th grade on complementary and supplementary angles. Now, one of the biggest parts of geometry is understanding the math vocabulary, because we'll use a lot of vocabulary in geometry. And if you're not familiar with the vocabulary, the math and solving for these math problems can be very difficult. All right, so let's fill in some terms here. These terms will be the fill in the blanks to these definitions here off to the side. So if you have two angles, angle AOC and angle COB, with a common side being OC, are blank angles if C is an interior of AOB. And those are going to be called adjacent. Adjacent angles. All right, our next one. When two lines intersect, any two non-adjacent angles formed by those lines are called blank angles or blank angles. So there's actually two answers here. We have the first blank is going to be vertical angles. And then the second two are known as also vertically opposite. So you'll see it written as two ways sometimes in math. Sometimes they'll just call them a vertical angle, and sometimes they'll call it vertically opposite angles. Next one. Two lines are blank if they intersect in one point and any of the angles formed by the intersection of the lines is 90 degrees. Two segments or rays are blank if the lines containing them are blank. This is going to be perpendicular. All right, let's fill in some more here down below. Angle relationships. So now we're actually going to look at some pictures here that kind of help us out. And this is where I can bring up my color panel here because I'm going to be doing lots of colors. Highlighters also help a lot in geometry and especially with angles. Sometimes if you can highlight different angles and different colors, you can see what you're solving for. So adjacent angles is what we have pictured here, where we have two angles. All right. One angle here is angle A. This is angle A. And then we have another angle here, which is angle B. Now, adjacent means that they share a common side. This is the common side that they share. Whoops. They both share this line right here to form their two angles. They both need that line there to form their two angles. But adjacent also means I can put these two angles together to create one larger angle, which they have here represented as C. All right, so when we write our statement, we can say A plus B equals the C. Okay? Now, an abbreviation we can use what they call this whole angle. We use this symbol here for angle. Kind of looks like the greater than, less than symbols, but we only use it in one direction here. And we're just going to say angles that add. So we can say angles that add. You add them up. Next one, we have vertical angles have equal measures. So what does that mean? That means that whatever this angle is here on the side for A is going to be exactly the same as B. And so what I tell students is if you can come through one angle, use a different color, go through one angle, hit the vertex, and then come out the other side, then those are vertical. So these two are also vertical. This one here is vertical of this one here. And the cool thing about vertical angles is whatever angle A is the same as B. So we just say A equals B. And then we would just write vertical angles would be the abbreviation if we were writing that a little faster. Let's look at the ones below. Angles on a line, okay? If the vertex of the ray lies on a line, but the ray is not contained in the line, then the sum of the measures of the two angles forms a 180. All right, so 180 degrees is whatever we get when we form a completely straight line. Let me see if I can get that there. A straight line. So straight lines are always 180 degrees. So if I take angle A here and I add it to angle B here, do you see how it'll form 180 degrees? So what we call these angles are called angles on a line, also known as supplementary angles. But for here, we're just going to say that if I take A and I add it to B, I get 180 degrees. So we would say, for an abbreviation, if we were writing this quickly, we would say angles, angle and the S means plural, on a line. Now we have angles that form at a point. So if you look here, we're going to go all the way around. If I have angle A and I add it to angle B, and then I add that to angle C, I get a 360. I literally made a circle between all of those angles. So what we could say is angles A plus B plus C give me 360. How can we write that in abbreviation? We would say angles at a point. They all share the same point of vertex, being, in this case, A. All right, here's some special angle pairs. Angle pairs is when you need one or more to create what they're wanting you to do. And again, in math, if they ask you for complementary or they ask you for supplementary, you kind of need to know what that means in order to solve the math problem. So you can see this written in two ways. Sometimes they'll be put together where they have an adjacent angle, which means they share that one side, or sometimes there'll be two completely opposite angles, but they're put together. So what this means is the sum of the measures of two angles add to be 90 degrees. So here we can say 30 plus 60 equals 90 degrees, which is represented here by that 90-degree square. But again, if they're separated, you won't see that little 90-degree square, and you need to know that you can still do 30 plus 60, and that forms a 90-degree. Now we have supplementary angles. Supplementary angles are the sum of the angles, or measures, let's say that first, of two angles. And sometimes it could be more. Sometimes there could be three that you're putting all together, but you need at least two. Add to be 180 degrees. And what that looks like is we have this 120, and then we add that to the 60, and this comes out to be 180 degrees. And again, we can have them separated here where they don't have an adjacent angle. They're two separate angles. We have a 120 and we have a 60, and we can still add those to equal 180 degrees. All right, here we go. Now let's start solving some problems, and now we can kind of get into the math. So if you need to refer back to those vocabulary terms, I would recommend doing so. That way you can understand what's going on here. All right, let's look at exercise 1. In a complete sentence, describe the relevant angle relationships in this diagram. Write an equation. All right, so first we need to have a sentence, then write an equation, just underlining what we need here. Write an equation for the angle relationship shown in the figure and solve for x. Confirm your answers by measuring with an actual protractor. All right, so you can see here we have a 90-degree angle. All right, and I can see that because it's represented by the 90-degree square. This angle measure here is 22 degrees. All right, and then I have an x measure. This x measure is actually for this whole thing here. You have to watch the arch for it. So it doesn't stop right there at that line. That line represents the 90 degree. The x wants to know this whole thing, okay? So let's go ahead and start solving it out. We know that if we took x and I added it to the 22. So what I'm going to do here is x plus that 22. What did I just form? I formed 180 degrees. So I'm going to set that equal to 180 degrees. Now let's go ahead and solve. I want to find out what x is, so I need to move that 22. So I take its opposite. So instead of adding 22, I'm going to subtract 22. And what you do to one side, you're going to do to the other side of the equal sign. So those cancel. My x falls down, and 180 minus 22 gives me 158 degrees. So this whole thing is 158 degrees. All right, now they did want in a complete sentence describe the relevant relationship. So we're going to say angle x added to angle equaling 22 degrees is forming a straight angle of 180 degrees. All right. Now you could take your protractor and measure this out just to confirm it if you needed to. Okay, and what you would see is that this whole measure here that just stops right here at this point, if you were just to measure this angle, this real big one, it would equal 158. All right, let's look at example 1. Example 1 says, the measures of two supplementary angles are in the ratio of 2 to 3. Find the measurements of the two angles. All right, so if we have a ratio of 2 to 3, that means when we add them, well, first here, we have some vocabulary. Supplementary. Supplementary means it needs to add to 180. And a relationship is 2 to 3, so which means every 2 of something, we can also add 3 of that same something. And that's a ratio, every 2 to 3. Then equals 180 degrees. Now we have, both of these have a variable of x, which means I can combine them. So 2x's plus 3x's give me 5x, which equals 180 degrees. Okay, we're going to divide by 5 because that's asking me 5 times what gives me 180. So I'm going to divide that so I can get my final answer. And the answer is 36. Now, let's find out what those angle measures are. So if I have 2x, that would be 2 times 36. And then if I had 3x, I'd have 3 times 36. Now you can take your calculator and just kind of do the math real quick on that. So we're going to say 2 times 36 gives me 72. And we have 3 times 36, which will give me 108. And there you go. All right, we'll go ahead and drop our calculator down there, and we'll move on to number 2. All right, number 2 says, in a pair of complementary angles, all right, so every time we see a word that's a vocabulary word, we need to underline it so we know what we're doing there. Complementary, if you remember, is 90 degrees, which means angles are going to add to form a 90 degree or right angle. The measurement of the larger angle is 3 times, so I'm going to put 3x there, than the smaller angle. Find the measure of the two angles. All right, so since they didn't say how big the smaller angle is, we're going to call that one x because this one's 3 times bigger than that one. So we need a 3x and we need an x. So let's write our equation here. We have the smaller angle plus the larger, which is 3 times larger, equals 90 degrees. Okay, so we have x plus 3x gives me 4x, which equals 90. All right, now we're going to divide by 4. And those 4's cancel. And I get x equals 22.5 degrees. All right. Now we had two angles. So the smaller angle equals 22.5 degrees. And the larger angle is 3 times 22.5. All right, so let's grab our calculator here. And we're going to go 3 times 22.5, and we get 67.5. So 67.5 degrees, and that's how big the larger one is. And again, the way you can check your work too is if you know that one's 67.5, add that back to the 22.5, and it should equal 90 degrees. And there you go. All right, let's move on down. All right. The measure of a supplementary or supplement angle, supplement meaning it adds to 180, of an angle is 6 degrees more than, so we're going to do plus 6 here, than twice the measure of an angle, so twice means 2 times. Find the measurement of the two angles. All right, so we have two angles. One of them is mentioned as being twice as large, so we know that one of the angles must also be x. So one of the angles is x, the other one is going to be 2 times bigger than that, plus 6. And when we add all that together, we're going to get 180 degrees. So 1x plus 2x gives me 3x plus 6 equals 180 degrees. Now you want the x by itself, which means I need to move this 6. So instead of adding 6, I'm going to subtract 6 from both sides. And you want to get rid of this one first because we need to eventually work up to getting rid of that 3. You can't get rid of that 3 if you're still hanging on to this 6. So 180 degrees minus 6 is going to give me 174 and bring down your 3x. Now this is asking me 3 times what gives me 174. So if you're not sure, divide that by 3 and x equals 58. All right, and again, one of our angles, so let's just say angle 1 equals 58 degrees. And then angle 2 is going to be, we're going to put that back in. That's going to, let me change my colors here. That's going to be 58 times 2 plus 6. So we grab our calculator here. We say 2 times 58 plus 6. And I get 122. So this equals 122. So equals 122 degrees. And again, you can always add these back into the calculator just to make sure. So if I add 58 back to that, I get 180. Good. I got a supplement. Now let's move on to number 4. All right, number 4 says, the measure of a complement angle, so I'm going to set this one up and then you guys are going to solve it. Complement angle, which means it adds to 90, is 32 more than, so we have a plus 32, 3 times an angle, 3x. Find the measurement of the two angles. So obviously another angle has to be x. All right, so I'm going to let you solve that one. It's very similar to the one we just did. Just this one's going to equal 90 degrees instead of 180 degrees. All right, so pause the video and work this problem out, and then I will help you on example 2. All right, example 2. So I'm going to do a little bit of this, and then you guys are going to finish it up. So 2 lines meet at a point is also called a vertex. Set up and solve the appropriate equation to solve x and to solve y. All right, so this is where those highlighters come in handy. X here is this whole angle here. There's my x. And then we have y. And y is going to be this angle right here. Okay, now some information I do know. I have a 90 degree here. And I have a 90 degree here. And I also have this degree measure here is 16. So a whole bunch of stuff going on here. Now let's see, what can I do? What can I work on here? If I take 16 and I add it to y, it forms that right angle right there. You see that? If I take 16 and add it to y, I'm going to highlight this angle here. It's this whole thing right there. And you know it's 90 degrees because it formed that 90 degree square. So let's go ahead and solve that and we can find out what y is. So I'm going to say 16 plus y equals 90. All right, now I want that y by itself, so I'm going to move that 16. Opposite of positive 16 is negative 16. And the 16s cancel. And I get y equals 74. So this whole thing here, okay, was added together to form 90. So how much is this if I have 16? So this part of everything, I'm going to change my color here. Just this y is 74 degrees. Now I want to solve for this x, okay? And the x again is right here. I'm going to highlight x using this color. X is this line, which means it's an adjacent line to the angle we just solved for. All right, I'm going to set this one up and then you'll finish it. So I can see that x is going to be this 74. If I include this 74 right here, what I just solved for, okay, let me actually go ahead and erase a little bit of my work here just so I had too many colors going on there and it was kind of hard to see everything. All right, so we are solving for angle x. All right, now angle x goes like this. Okay, now I just solved this and it was 74 degrees. All right, now if I see carefully here, if I added in angle 74 now, I would actually get a straight line. So if I took angle x and added it to angle y, I would get 180. So that's what we're going to do. X plus 74 equals 180. All right, you're going to tell me what x equals. And that will conclude this video tutorial.